Hey everyone, and welcome to Motion Tutorials, where we go over weekly topics in motion graphics, VFX, and 3D animation. I am your host, Sean Frangella, and in this week's episode, we have a very fun two-part tutorial about how to recreate this Avengers Age of Ultron 3D logo animation that's in the trailers for the movie, all inside of After Effects. So this is my final render I came up with, and I think I got pretty close. Only this one wasn't made in a big Hollywood studio. I made it in my living room, all in After Effects, using Element 3D and some other tricks and plugins. So a couple of parts of this are pretty straightforward, making 3D text and lens flares kid stuff these days and no big deal. The tricky part was figuring out how to create the animation of the 3D text outlines drawing in while this darker version of the 3D text appears behind it, and getting those outlines to be real 3D elements with textures, not just the 2D outlines. That's a lot easier to do. And I came up with a pretty fun technique to pull this off that I'm really excited about. Hopefully you guys will learn a lot, and hopefully it makes my parents feel good about how much time their 30-something-year-old son spends making videos on the internet. All right, so that's our final render. Let's take a look in After Effects at what we got going on. We have our 3D text that's all textured and lit. We got some background stuff like particles. We got our trusty lens flares. And then we have this additional animation at the beginning with these lines animating in real 3D with the textures, all lining up with the main dark logo that comes in and then animates to our final logo. So there's a lot of fun stuff in here. We'll do some pretty cool stuff and get as close as we can to the original one that I saw in the trailers. So let's get started. I'll make a new composition with Command N, and I'll call this Avengers logo wow or something. And the first thing I'll need is this Avengers logo in a vector format. And you can get that online if you just search Avengers vector logo and find one of these sites that has it. It's important that we have the vector version, because what I need to do is bring this into Illustrator and just select everything, do edit copy. And then in After Effects, I'm going to make a new solid, and I'll do edit paste. And then I get this cool pink Avengers logo because that happens to be the solid color that was set. And that's going to be the basis for our logo. So now to make that 3D, I'm going to make another solid, and I'll call this E3D and change this to a different color. I'll go to OK. And then I'm going to go to Effects, Video Copilot, Element, and drag this on. And Element 3D is a plugin by Video Copilot. If you want to pick up that or any of the plugins and extra stuff I talk about in this tutorial, you can get that from my Amazon affiliate link in my description if you want to pick that up. So to get that 3D logo, first I need to go to Custom Text and Masks. And for Path Layer 1, I'm going to grab that magenta solid, which maybe I'll rename logo, and then it'll show up as logo. And then I'll go into Scene Setup, and I'm going to click Extrude, and we're done. Basic logo. Look at that. So that gets our extruded object, but there's a lot to do to make this look well, so stay with me. Don't quit the video just yet. There's a lot of work. What we want to do is create some bevels and get some textures on this that look a little more like this final one we got here. So what I'll do to get started is go to Presets, Bevels, and I can grab one of these bevels that's kind of a starting point. I'll just grab this bold one and double click it. And that's not what the letters look like, but this will give us a good base of 2 bevels. And if I twirl down this extrusion model, there's now 2 textures on it that represent each bevel. So with this top one, I can just turn up extrusion so it's pretty big. And then on the second one, I'll do the same thing, turn it up till it passes those letters quite a bit. And then I can check on Enable under Bevel Outline, and that's going to give me just the edges. And that's what I want for this. And then I can just tweak the settings a bit. And we turn up that bevel curve so it's not so jagged. And I can always turn up the bevel size if I want to kind of make this a little bigger. And that's kind of our base parts. But these are the colors. We need to work on our textures a bit. And to get started, we can grab some preset materials and make some changes. So go to Materials, Pro Shaders 2. And we need one for the edges and one for the inside. So for the edges, I'll go grab a metal one. We can use probably any of these, but I like this metal flake. And I'll just drag that onto this bevel 2, and that'll drop on that texture. And then for the letters, if I go to translucent, there's some pretty cool textures. One that I thought really worked well for this look is this ice blue. So just drag that on. But I don't want blue text, I want red. So how I can change that is go to this ice blue texture, scroll down a bit, And under this reflectivity and refraction colors, I'll just change both of those to my reddish color. And since there's some refraction going on with transparency, we want that one too. And if I still want a little brighter, I could even turn up luminance and change the color of that to red as well. And that's going to help just brighten that up a bit. And now if I go to OK, there's our 3D text in After Effects as a starting point. But we still got a lot to do. We want to add our lights and textures and animation and really get this thing going. So let's keep plugging along and work on this. So I'll go back into scene setup, and now we can really push this a bit more. If we check on environment, that's going to show us this background layer that's being used to light our 3D object. And if we go to environment and open this backlight environment and go to 2K, these are a lot of different options of how we could light that. And you can see how dramatically different they look. And there's this one that's pretty cool that looks pretty close to the original animation, this blue and red one that gives us some nice range of pink and blue lighting. And now if we go to OK, we can see that drastically changes that and looks a lot more interesting. But there's still a lot to do. This is really just the base. So let's keep going. What I want to do next to really start to light this thing and get it looking good is I'm going to go to render settings. I can check on physical environment, turn on show and background, and I could just rotate this if I want to, switch out the lighting a bit, and that'll just give us some different options about how this light is coming in. I kind of like it about there. And then I can go to lighting. And in addition to this, I can go to this add lighting, and this is going to give me different options for some invisible lights that are lighting this. And if I go to cinema, it gives me a pretty cool option. And then I can go to additional lighting and just tone that down a little bit. So some nice lighting. And now what I want to do is work on my shadows and ambient occlusion so that starts to look a little more realistic, and add some After Effects lights and cameras to get this thing really working. So I'll go to ambient occlusion and I'll check this on, and that's going to add my little contact shadows, which is nice. And I might just want to take the radius to half so they aren't going quite as far. And then I want to go to shadows, and I can enable those. And instead of shadow mapping, I'll use ray traced. And that's going to let me use lights within my scene to cast shadows. So to get the lighting and camera set up, I'll first make a new camera. And this one's fine. I'll just leave it at 50 millimeter so it won't change anything. And then I'll make a new light. And I'll keep it at a point light, and I'll change the color to kind of a reddish, pinkish color. I'll go to OK. And now we can see that's lighting our object. If I go to two views, I can see where this light is, and I can just pull it quite a bit back behind the camera and off to the side a bit and change this to right and maybe just pull this up a little. And now you can see, because I have shadows turned on in this light right here, we're getting those cast shadows within these letters from the edges, and that's pretty cool. And if we want to soften those shadows, we can turn up shadow diffusion here to a bit higher. And I'll go back to this side view being from the top, and I can just reposition this a bit to get some nice little shadows that are really going to help. And that's coming along. I might want to even push the color of that light a little more by going to my light properties and making this really dark. You can see how changing the light color will really change how that's looking, and maybe pull the intensity up a bit. That's looking quite a bit better. And then to balance this out, I can just duplicate this light with edit duplicate. And I'll pull this one over to the side so we can light the other side. And then on this light, I'll press AA to get my light properties. I'll make this one kind of a more of a bluish color to balance that out a bit. And maybe just take the intensity down to like 100. And that's definitely helping. And we can see we get some nice shadows being cast in there. And we just close all those and go back to my E3D layer. We can keep tweaking these settings. So here we have our shadows. And if we go down to output under this multipass mixer, we can even push those shadows a bit further in compositing. So if we just want a little darker shadows, we can pull up that shadow amount, and it's going to darken those a bit. And I can just move the lights around, kind of light this differently and get different shadows. And then I'll just go back to one view and turn off my show and BG for my physical environment. And that's really getting there with the rendering of the logo and looking pretty nice so far. And since this is just an effect, I can always just add curves to color balance the whole thing together. I can keep trying to get pretty close with tweaking all the textures and settings, but since this is all in After Effects, I can always grab curves push it to be a little more red, pull the contrast a bit, rather than just only working with the textures. And now I kind of feel like this icy texture is showing through a little, so I might go back to my element scene setup and go to that texture, and I can go click on glossiness, and you might just want to pull this gamma down a bit and take a look in closer and just tweak these settings so we're not getting so much of that showing up. And let's take a look at that. Looks even worse, so that's not what I wanted to do. Maybe let's go back in there, pull the gamma back up, see if this looks any better. Not really. Let's go back in there and maybe just put just a little bit of gamma, go to OK. And one thing we could do if we don't like kind of how that's hitting, that's being caused by the light. So if I go back to 2 views and just maybe pull this light a little further away, that's really helping now. So now it's balanced out a bit and we're still getting our shadows and a little bit of that, but not on the whole logo. So I'll go to 1 view and that's looking pretty good so far. Let's keep going, though. There's a lot to still do. If we take a look at our final one, we got quite a ways. So what I want to do is get some color in the background, just a little bit of red haze. So first I'll make a black background with a new solid, call this BG, just make it completely black. And then I want to grab my ellipse tool and I'll fill this with kind of a darkish red. I'll just make kind of an ellipse here. I can call this haze and just put this right above the background. Take the opacity down a bit and then just grab the fast blur effect from over here and just blur that out, just so we have a little bit of color behind it, kind of bring that out a bit. So now the big thing that's happening on top of this is we got some lens flares here, and they're all animating and following the logo. So let's get those in with optical flares. I'm going to go layer new solid, and I like to change these colors just to make it more noticeable, and I'll call this flares. And then I'm going to go to my effects and go to video copilot optical flares, and this is another video copilot plugin that's pretty useful. And if I change this to render mode on transparent, there we go. Look at that, super cool lens flare. And now we're making movies. But this default setting isn't exactly what I want. So what I could do is go to options and I'll go to preset browser, grab these pro presets, and there's some cool places to start here. They'll give us a nice base. I'll grab this anti-fractal one and then go to OK. And that's going to give me a good start, but it's blue. I don't want that, and I want it to be able to be 3D for when the camera's moving in. So what I'm going to do is change this positioning mode from source type to track lights, and then it's just going to look like it shuts off because there's not any lights in there yet. And since I already have some lights in my scene, I'm going to change this name starts with from anything to A, so it doesn't pull in flares from those lights. And then I'm going to make a new light, and I'll call this A light 1. Make this a pretty bright red color. Go to OK. And that is way too bright. So I'm going to take the intensity down. And now I'll just move this to that little corner of the A and just get that into position. And now the flare is going to follow the movement of that light, which is 3D. So when the camera's moving, it'll all come together and all work pretty well. But that's not quite the look I want. And what's cool about optical flares, if we go back in, is we can use these presets as kind of a base, but some of the stuff I don't like and I kind of want to change out. So if I go to lens objects, I can add in some other things like streaks, maybe get a couple of those. I can go to custom, and there's a lot of these other cool objects that I could add, like 3D rings. Maybe just shut off these original ones that came with the preset, and turn off that bright white, turn off those, and then I can kind of vary it up with get some lens orbs, maybe this extra random stripe, drop in the soft iris. This is really going to help it kind of fill out that gradient background. Maybe grab another anamorphic streak and kind of build a custom one that doesn't just look like these presets from these custom objects and basic objects, and really just build up these layers. And then I'll go to OK, and that's really helping. And now I probably need to take that light down a bit. And I might want to go back in and tweak that a little more. I kind of lost that little dot, so maybe I probably want that. Looks like it's right there. And I can even go to this lens texture and grab one of these little gritty lens textures and then just turn the brightness down just so it looks like whoever was filming this didn't clean their lens, which we'd never want, but looks cool in motion graphics to purposely put in things that you avoid in production. And then I'll go to OK. And that's really helping me get there. And in the final composite, there's another little light blue light. So if I just duplicate this whole light, if I use Shift Command H, that'll hide and show my little tools. I'll just put this one at the bottom of the A, so we get this extra little flare. And I'll just take the intensity of this one way down to like 25, and then change the color from red to white, and kind of just position that into place. Maybe take the intensity a little higher so we can see it. And then we get those nice flares, and probably just keep going back in here and just maybe take some of these things off now because we've added a bit too much. We can't see the logo. And there we go. That's looking a little better. And I might want to go back into my E3D layer and kind of make some texture changes. So that's a little not getting enough shadows. So I might go to scene setup. Let's tweak that a little and really pull these edges out so we get a little more shadows here. So I'll take a look at that. That's looking a little better. And the next couple things we want to do is get this zooming in from our camera, and I'll just drag that to the top, and get the color change, which is the big thing, from this dark version to this light version. And then in the second half, we'll worry about these lines drawing in, the particles, and all the little extra finishing touches. So to get that zoom on my camera, I'll open position and point of interest. I'll make a keyframe for my end position, put that at about 10 seconds here. And then at the beginning, I'll just press C to get my camera tools and just pull back in Z space. So while this is happening, we'll get this nice little dolly zoom in. And since the flares are tracking the 3D lights, they'll follow right along, which is great. And if they're a little off, which it looks like this one is, I can just reposition it. And then we get that nice animation. Now, the other big thing that's happening is after these are drawing in, there's this darker and a reddish black version that then animates into the colored one. And how we can do that is on our E3D layer. In addition to this curves, I'm going to grab another curves, drag this on, and I'll just pull this way down and pull this top point down a bit too. And you can see this gives us this really dark version, but we still get this sense of color. And now I might want to change that light. I think this blue is being caused by this second light. So I'll go to light properties, and maybe we'll just go with all red lights. That's fine. That looks a little better, kind of more what I was trying to get to. And that texture is still bugging me a bit. Let's see if we can just tweak that a bit back in our texture settings. And you take this reflectivity down a bit and have just little. That looks a little better, a little more subtle. And now what I can do is animate this curves on and off. And it's going to go from this dark version to the light version. So at 2 seconds, I'll turn a stopwatch on for this curves. And then I'll go ahead to 6 seconds. And I'll just fix this and kind of bring it back up. Press U to see all my keyframes. And what it's going to do is animate that curve, which will bring up the logo from dark to bright. And now I might want to push my main curves that's not animating even a little further, just because the contrast isn't quite there. I'm not really seeing some of my shadows that I liked. And that's looking a little better. And if I want to really push this transition more, I could even grab brightness and contrast as another color correction effect and animate these on. So I'll take the brightness down a bit and really bump up the contrast. And now we can have those animating too. So I'll stopwatch both brightness and contrast, go to my other keyframe, and just zero those out so it gets back to the original position. And just press U and grab all those and just do easy ease in, just so that it's smoothly going to that. And then we get this nice color change using color correction from one look of the logo to the other. And now the main things left to do is this cool right-on animation that's working with the 3D text, the animation of the flares and these particles. So we'll pick this up on the second half of this one. Be sure to keep watching and check that one out, where we'll keep going and do all those little things. And I think we're going pretty good. What do you guys think? Do you think we're getting close? Do you think this is way off? You can let me know on Twitter at Sean Frangella, or you can check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/Vitel and let me know any questions, how it's going, how yours is coming along, and interact that way. So be sure to check out part 2 where we'll keep going, build out the rest of this Avengers animation to get this cool 3D right-on effect. And I will see you at the next tutorial, which should be this one. Do you like watching these tutorials and want to see more episodes more often? You can help keep the show going by lending your support on Patreon at patreon.com/SeanFrangella. More importantly, if you want to throw in a couple extra bucks, you can get bonus content like project files used in the tutorials, answers to direct questions, live hangouts for questions, and even request specific tutorial topics for me to use for my next video. Also be sure to subscribe to the show by clicking the subscribe button or visiting the show homepage at youtube.com/SeanFrangella. And if you're hip with social media and have a question about this tutorial, you can find me on Twitter at Sean Frangella. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you at the next video.